It was a rainy night, and I was driving home from my shift at the late-night diner where I work. It had been a quiet shift, but I still had a weird amount of energy, so I knew I would need to take melatonin when I got home. I was driving my usual route, a scenic road by day but very dark at night, lacking many light posts. There are occasional little parking lots with cute strips of stores or family-owned restaurants and shops, then just stretches of nothingness, which means forest obviously. I was passing one of these mentioned parking lots of a well-known deli and saw a woman standing out in the rain under a light post, waving me down. I slowed down and realized it was a slightly older woman who appeared to be in her mid-50s. This woman was really tall, about 5 feet 10 inches or 5 feet 11 inches, but very skinny. I lowered my window and shouted, "Do you need a ride?" She came over to the front door, opened it, and thanked me, calling me a hero. I asked where she was heading, and she said just up the road to town. She was soaking wet, getting my car all wet too, but I like to think of myself as a good person and couldn't in good conscience leave another woman out there in the cold rain. However, picking up a random man would be a different story. The woman seemed sweet, but I noticed that she was missing a few teeth, which was very off-putting. I started to wonder if she might be homeless. She didn't smell or look like a homeless person, but the rain soaking her and her clothes could have been masking any scent temporarily. Plus, her hair was so wet that what may have usually been scraggly, undone hair could now have been weighed down and straightened by the water. Either way, the woman was smiling the whole time and didn't seem like a threat. We pulled up to an intersection with a gas station on one corner. I pulled in next to a pump, thinking I might as well fill up. I asked if she wanted anything from inside. I was really doing my good deed for the week. She said, "No thanks, honey," so I went inside to pay the attendant for gas and get some spiked seltzers since the weekend was coming. When I got back to my car, the woman was gone. I quickly looked around the gas station lot, which was tiny, but she was gone. She must have run off somewhere. I felt slightly bad, thinking she was a lost, helpless woman, but part of me also felt relieved. I filled up my SUV's tank and drove home. When I got back to the house, I went straight inside my apartment, which is the first level of a two-family house. There's a tenant upstairs, and me. The front door into the foyer is usually left unlocked, and then the two doors leading to each apartment are locked. I let myself in out of the rain and into my apartment, setting the seltzers down on the counter. I wasn't that tired yet, so I took a melatonin and tried to go to bed. Even with the melatonin, I had a hard time sleeping that night, as my mind was racing with thoughts, especially about that woman I picked up earlier and what might have happened to her. At certain points, I heard slight sounds from outside my bedroom but dismissed them as coming from the upstairs tenant. Boy, do I wish I had been more suspicious before falling asleep. I woke up in my dark bedroom, which usually never happens when I take melatonin. I usually sleep like a baby through the night. I sat up, feeling drowsy and really thirsty. Reaching over to the table next to my bed for my water, I saw and heard something across the room from me. I saw someone crouched in the corner of my bedroom, behind a clothing dresser, with their legs folded. I thought I had to be hallucinating. I shook my head violently and made weird noises, even slapping myself in the face, but now whoever was in the corner stood up and walked out of the room. I didn't scream or say a word, I just sat in my bed in literal shock. The part that had me questioning my sanity afterward was that there wasn't a single sound from outside the room, no footsteps or door closing. I grabbed my phone and called my dad, who picked up, confused about why I was calling so late. I told him what I saw, and he said, "Trish, you probably just had a night terror." I stayed on the phone with him as I became more awake and checked my room, turning on the lights to the living room. It was a small space, and no one was there. I started to believe I might have hallucinated, but still, I slept with the bedroom door locked that night. In the morning, I drank some coffee and got dressed for the gym. When I went to open the door to the foyer, I realized it was already unlocked. My heart sank. Was what I saw last night real? I did another look around the apartment, confirming no one was inside. I went out to my car and opened the back door to put my gym bag in the back seat, and that's when I noticed damp, yellow-brownish stains all over the floor, and my blanket that I always kept back there was gone. I wanted to cry or scream. I figured out that the woman had snuck into the back seat last night when I was in the gas station. She either somehow unlocked my apartment door or I mistakenly left it unlocked. I called my dad again, frantically asking what to do. He said to check and make sure nothing was stolen, and if nothing was, then calling the police wouldn't do anything. I checked the house and didn't find anything missing, just my blanket from the car. I skipped the gym that day and stayed bottled up in my apartment for a while afterward. I was genuinely disturbed and didn't want to live there much longer, so after that month, I found a new place to live. This occurred a few months back, and I'm not sure why I agreed, but I decided to join my friend Michael at a house party he was attending during our first year of high school. Even though I wasn't actually invited, Michael managed to pull some strings, and I accepted the invitation. Knowing that I wouldn't be able to drive, I opted to go with Michael. When we arrived at the house late at night, Michael advised me to leave my phone in the car. He explained that I might lose it or someone might try to take it while I wasn't looking. At first, I was puzzled, but I nodded and we exited the car. Michael and I then went into the house and into the backyard where the party was happening. I took a quick look around and saw people engaging in various activities, such as smoking, drinking, and possibly even using drugs in small groups. Michael encouraged me to mingle and greet a few people. After a few hours, I realized I had drunk way too much. My vision was completely blurry. As I approached the house, I leaned against the wall to steady myself. I noticed the time on my watch, which indicated it was either midnight or AM. Realizing it was time to leave, I set out to find Michael. Despite feeling overwhelmingly tired, I searched the yard for him, but I couldn't find him. When I asked a few others if they had seen Michael, they all said they hadn't. I decided to call him to find out where he was, so I reached into my pocket to get my phone, but it wasn't there. I mentally cursed myself for leaving my phone in Michael's car. It had disappeared with him. I realized my only option to get home was to walk, remembering that my house wasn't too far from the party. However, the night was chilly since it was fall. I considered asking someone else for a ride, but I didn't know anyone else there who could help, so I stuck with my plan to walk home in the dark by myself. I reached the road and began stumbling down the street, feeling lightheaded and dizzy from too much alcohol. After a few minutes, I made it to the main area of the street and continued walking. My mind lazily wandered, thinking about why Michael had left me alone at the party or why I had followed his stupid idea of leaving my phone in his car. I started cursing myself for being so careless with my drinking and getting drunk when I knew better. I stopped walking because I was getting tired and wrapped my arms tightly around my chest to keep warm. Then I remembered that I could hitchhike, so I extended my arm and thumb, hoping someone would notice me. A few cars drove by without stopping, and as minutes passed, I began to feel uneasy, thinking I might have to start walking again. It was past AM, and while there were a few cars passing by, no one stopped. Either they didn't see me or didn't care. I hesitated, considering walking home again, but realized that in my drunken state, it would be too daunting. While still holding out my thumb, a gray truck pulled up and stopped in front of me. I smiled as I stumbled toward the vehicle. The window rolled down, and an older man with a beard asked if I needed a ride. I said yes and told him where my house was before getting into the truck, feeling relieved for the ride. As we started driving, the man began making small talk, asking what had happened to me. However, I was too disoriented to have a proper conversation, and all I could manage were low mumbles and groans. When we turned onto my street, I began to feel uneasy for some reason. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this man. Suddenly, we drove past my house. I told the man that we had just passed it and felt a strong urge to get out, but I was too drunk to move. I was about to ask him to let me out before we went too far when he turned to me, and I noticed a sinister look on his face. "You know, you shouldn't be drunk while hitchhiking," the man said with a dark smirk. "You make a very easy target." He then reached over and began rubbing my leg. I wasn't sure what he intended, but it clearly wasn't good. Before he could do anything further, we heard a loud siren behind the truck, and flashing red and blue lights illuminated the night. Realizing it was the police, I felt a surge of relief. The man panicked and stopped unlocking the doors, which allowed me to jump out of the truck. I ran as fast as I could, and a police officer quickly approached me. I explained the entire situation to him. Unfortunately, nothing illegal had occurred at that point, but the officer informed me he was searching for someone in a gray truck who had reportedly stolen something from a store. I'm not sure if it was the man who picked me up or someone else, but I was just thankful that the police officer intervened. A cop gave me a ride home, and from that moment on, I resolved not to get so drunk that I couldn't think clearly. I now understand the importance of being responsible and staying aware of my surroundings, even when having a good time. This took place while I was still in college. I was attending a large party school in upstate New York. Although I wasn't part of a sorority, I frequented many of the fraternity parties. I went through a heavy drinking phase during college, which, while unfortunate, I suppose it's good that I got it out of my system. There was an upcoming fraternity party that my friends Deanna and Kayla wanted to attend. I was never one to turn down a party unless I was severely hungover. Even then, I'd sometimes go out anyway. I lived off campus with 3 other girls. We weren't a sorority house or a team house, just 4 friends renting a house together. The party we were heading to was hosted by Kappa Sigma, I believe. Their house was about minutes from campus. We pre-game heavily at our house before calling an Uber, which we split the cost of. During the Uber ride, we continued drinking, a recipe for disaster. By the time we arrived at the party, I was almost blacked out. My memory of the house was hazy, and I had never been to a Kappa Sigma party before that night. It's strange, but my recollections from that night are brief. I vaguely remember the outside of the house, with several fraternity guys standing out front, the DJ in the living room, and the beer pong tables in the kitchen. I was later told that I played beer pong with some random frat guy and spent a significant part of the night talking to him in a corner. After that, no one knows where I went. The last thing I remember was waking up on the grass beside the road, dazed. My head was pounding, and I still felt somewhat intoxicated. It was pitch black outside, and I was lying by a wooded area, far from the university. There was not much besides woods and the occasional small town. A few light posts were further down the road, so it wasn't complete darkness. I patted my pockets, searching for my phone, and panicked when I realized they were empty. My crossbody bag was also missing. I had nothing on me. I started to freak out, unable to call for help, check the time, or determine my location. I looked around the area where I was lying, but found nothing. My white shirt was dirted, but that was the least of my concerns. I started walking down the road toward the light posts, realizing there were no buildings in sight. I was on some random back road. I leaned on a light pole, contemplating what to do, and decided to wait for someone to pass by to ask for help. It took a long time, at least minutes, before I saw headlights approaching. I stepped onto the road, waving my arms and jumping to catch their attention. The car slowed and stopped beside me. I approached the vehicle, and the driver rolled down the window. He asked if I was okay. I explained that I was stranded without a phone and needed a ride home. He told me to get in, and I did, making sure to express my gratitude. He asked about my situation and how I ended up stranded. I told him I had been at a party, and the next thing I remembered was waking up on the side of the road. In hindsight, I should have been vague and not revealed that I had been drunk and vulnerable. He asked why I hadn't called for help, and I told him I lost my phone as well. The look he gave me was judgmental. I then took a closer look at him. He appeared to be around years old, not particularly attractive, with a thin goatee and a large nose. I gave him my address to enter into his GPS. As he did so, I heard him mutter, "Okay, here we go." I asked how far we were, and he said about minutes, which seemed accurate since the frat house was roughly that distance from mine. The man spoke softly the entire time, asking basic questions in a voice that felt oddly unsettling. We continued driving on the same road, and I grew concerned as it seemed we had been driving for over minutes on the same back road with nothing but trees. I asked him how much further, and he didn't respond right away. When I repeated my question, he answered that it was not far, but it didn't seem right. I started noticing he was frequently looking at me, turning his head to stare for a few seconds before looking back at the road. I began feeling sick and asked if he had entered the correct address. He assured me he had, but then asked about my underwear color while placing his hand on my knee and rubbing it. I moved his hand away and pleaded with him not to hurt me, saying I just wanted to get home safely. He responded with, "Why would I hurt you?" After saying this, he pulled the car onto the grass and put it in park. He leaned toward me as if to put his arms around me, but I opened the door and ran into the woods. Luckily, I was wearing Air Forces, so running in the woods was manageable. I ran just far enough to be out of sight from the car. When I no longer saw its headlights, I heard the man shouting into the woods, "Where are you?" "I just want to." I covered my mouth to muffle my breathing and out of fear. I waited until I heard a car door slam and the sound of a car speeding away. After a few moments, I walked back to the road to confirm he was gone. I felt utterly helpless and didn't want to encounter him again but needed help. I waited at the edge of the woods for another car to come by, and eventually, one did. I saw the headlights from afar and waited until I was sure it was a different car before jumping out, waving my arms, and yelling. The car stopped, and it was another man, slightly older. I sat in the back seat, so shaken that I barely spoke except to answer questions about my situation. Thankfully, this man dropped me off at home around a.m. My friends were still awake, waiting for me. They had my phone and bag and were considering calling the police if I didn't return by morning. No one knew who I left with or how I ended up on the side of the road. The guy I was with claimed he didn't leave with me, and there's no solid proof I left with anyone. There's no clear explanation for how I ended up on the roadside. After this night, I drastically reduced my drinking and never wanted to be in a situation where hitchhiking was necessary again.